I watched silently as he flashed his new Rolex at dinner, purchased with the savings we'd built over 15 years of marriage. He didn't know I'd been quietly building $1 million business empire that would leave him penniless and desperate, all while he drained our retirement account to spoil his mistress with luxury gifts and five-star hotels. The crystal wine glass felt cool against my palm as I listened to David brag about his latest business trip to the Maldives. Our dining room, with its hand-carved mahogany table and imported Italian chandelier, had become his favorite stage for these performances. 10 of our closest friends sat around us, hanging on every word of his fabricated success story, while I watched the ice slowly melt in my untouched wine. If only he knew that while he was enjoying beachfront sunsets with his 26-year-old assistant, I was finalizing the acquisition that would make my company worth 8 figures. The same company that would soon own the firm where he worked, making me not just his wife, but his boss's boss. I suppressed a smile as he showed off yet another expensive watch to our dinner guests, paid for with the retirement savings he thought I was too naive to monitor. "Charlotte's just not good with money," he said with that condescending smile I'd grown to despise. "That's why I handle all our finances." He reached over to pat my hand, a gesture that once felt loving, but now made my skin crawl. Our friends nodded sympathetically, while I thought about the offshore accounts and investment portfolio I'd built over the past 5 years, ever since I first suspected his infidelity. "Remember when she tried to start that little online business?" David continued, loosening his designer tie. "Thank God I talked her out of it. Can you imagine?" More laughter, more knowing looks. I took a small sip of wine, maintaining my practiced expression of quiet acceptance. If they only knew that little online business had been a carefully crafted cover for my real venture, a rapidly expanding tech consulting firm that had just been valued at $50 million. Living in the shadows of his financial abuse had taught me patience and the art of playing the long game. Every time he protected me from our finances, I was building something bigger. Every time he transferred money to his secret account, thinking I wouldn't notice, I was documenting everything. The spreadsheets, bank statements, and hotel receipts were all safely stored with my lawyers. "Honey, tell them about that cute little budget app you downloaded," David smirked, helping himself to more of the expensive Bordeaux I'd selected from our cellar. "She actually thought she could help manage our investments." More patronizing chuckles around the table. Little did he know that while he was downloading dating apps, I was building a financial empire that would make his corporate salary look like pocket change. Sarah, my closest friend and the only person who knew the truth, caught my eye from across the table. She'd been my silent partner from the beginning, helping me channel my rage into something productive. "At least she's trying to learn," she offered diplomatically, playing her role perfectly. David waved her comment away with his watch-laden wrist. "Some people are just better with numbers," he declared, launching into another story about his latest corporate triumph. I watched him carefully, noting how his left hand shook slightly when he mentioned his recent business trips, a tell he'd developed ever since the affair began. That same hand had once held mine while we planned our future together, dreaming about the retirement we'd enjoy after decades of saving. Now those savings were being spent on luxury hotel suites and designer gifts for Jessica, his young assistant who thought she'd found her sugar daddy. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was spending our money to impress her, while my company was about to acquire his firm in a deal that would leave them both stunned. The dinner party continued its predictable course. David holding court, our say, friends hanging on his every word, and me, the supposedly financially illiterate wife, sitting quietly with the knowledge that would soon turn his world upside down. My phone buzzed discreetly in my lap, a message from my CFO. "Acquisition papers ready. Board meeting confirmed for Monday." "More wine, dear?" David's voice pulled me back to the present. I passed him my glass, watching as he filled it with the same careless entitlement he'd shown our marriage. The same attitude that had led him to believe he could drain our retirement account without consequences. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. Our story began 15 years ago, not in the gleaming corporate offices where it would end, but in a small coffee shop near Central Park. I was 25, working as a junior software developer, when David walked in wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. He was 32, already a rising star at Morton & Pierce Financial, and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about paying bills. "You're in my seat," he'd said with a playful smile, gesturing to my table by the window. I'd looked up from my laptop, ready to argue, only to find myself disarmed by his charm. That was David's gift, making you feel special, chosen, even when he was calling you wrong. We married 2 years later. I still remember his wedding vows. "I'll always protect you, always take care of you." Back then, those words sounded romantic. I didn't realize they would become his excuse for financial control. The first red flag appeared in our 3rd year of marriage. I'd received a substantial bonus at work and wanted to invest it independently. "Baby, you know I handle our finances," he'd said, that charming smile now tinged with condescension. "Just transfer it to our joint account. I'll make sure it grows." I did as he asked, watching my hard-earned money disappear into accounts I wasn't allowed to monitor. That's when I started my secret ledger. Every time he dismissed my financial input, every time he made a unilateral decision about our money, I documented it. The pattern was subtle but clear. David wasn't just managing our money. He was controlling it, and me. "You should quit your job," he suggested after his first major promotion. "Focus on enjoying life. I make more than enough for both of us." The proposal came with a platinum credit card in my name, a gilded cage disguised as generosity. I kept working, but shifted to remote consulting, telling him my income had dropped. Every extra dollar I earned went into a separate account he knew nothing about. Sarah became my confidant during those early years. We'd met at a women's entrepreneurship seminar I'd attended in secret, and she saw through my carefully constructed facade immediately. "You're not just a software developer," she'd said over coffee one day. "You're an architect of solutions. Why are you hiding it?" That conversation sparked something in me. While David thought I was dabbling in freelance work, Sarah and I began building what would become Quantum Solutions. My experience in software development paired perfectly with her business acumen. We started small, intentionally flying under the radar. The discovery of his affair didn't come as a shock. It was merely confirmation of a suspicion I'd harbored for months. Credit card statements showing dinner for 2 at restaurants I'd never visited. Hotel charges in cities he'd claimed were just day trips. The classic signs were all there, but it was the money transfers that caught my attention first. Our retirement account, which had held over $2 million from both our contributions over the years, began showing regular withdrawals. 10,000 here, 20,000 there. Always just under the amount that would trigger an automatic notification. David thought he was being clever, probably assumed I never checked the statements he so carefully managed for me. What he didn't know was that I'd been monitoring every transaction through a backdoor access I'd created years ago. Each withdrawal was meticulously documented, along with corresponding charges at luxury hotels, high-end jewelry stores, and designer boutiques. Jessica, his young assistant, was apparently an expensive companion to maintain. The real turning point came last spring. I was already running a successful company in secret, but kept my outward appearance modest, driving the same reliable car I'd had for years and wearing mid-range brands. David loved this, often commenting on how lucky I was to have him providing our luxury items. Then he made his fatal mistake. "I've moved some money around," he announced over dinner one evening. "Diversifying our investments." His tone was casual, but his left hand had that telltale shake. The next day, I discovered he'd liquidated nearly half our retirement savings, almost $1 million, supposedly for a promising investment opportunity. That same week, Jessica started showing up to work in designer clothes and a new Mercedes. The pieces weren't hard to connect. Most people would have confronted him immediately, demanded answers, filed for divorce. But years of watching David manipulate money, and people had taught me to think strategically. While he was busy playing sugar daddy with our retirement savings, I was positioning Quantum Solutions for its biggest move yet, the acquisition of Morton & Pierce Financial, the very firm where he and Jessica worked. Sarah watched me as I refined my plan. "You're scary sometimes, you know that?" she said one afternoon as we reviewed the acquisition paperwork. All these years, he thought he was the financial genius in the relationship. I smiled, thinking of the empire I'd built while playing the role of the financially naive wife. Quantum Solutions had grown beyond our wildest expectations, with offices in 3 countries and a client list that read like a who's who of the tech world. And through it all, David remained oblivious, too absorbed in his affair and his own supposed cleverness to notice that his wife was becoming one of the most powerful women in the industry. The final pieces were falling into place. In 3 days, the board would vote on the acquisition, and David would discover that the wife he'd so proudly protected from financial matters was about to become his boss, right after she became his ex-wife. The penthouse office of Quantum Solutions occupied the top floor of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, though David thought I worked from our home office in the suburbs. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold. 15 floors below, Morton & Pierce Financial occupied 3 floors of the same building. I'd intentionally chosen this location 2 years ago, knowing this day would eventually come. "The final surveillance report is in," Sarah announced, walking into my office with her ever-present tablet. "You're going to want to see this." She pulled up a video on the massive screen that dominated one wall. There was David, entering the 4 seasons with Jessica, both laughing as they flashed the credit card connected to our retirement account. "Timestamp?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Last Tuesday, when he said he was at that crucial board meeting in Boston." Sarah paused the video, zooming in on Jessica's wrist. "Apparently, your retirement savings just bought her a Cartier love bracelet, the same one you mentioned wanting for your anniversary last month." I smiled, adding the footage to our ever-growing collection of evidence. The wall of my private office was lined with monitors, each displaying different aspects of our operation. One showed real-time trading data for Morton & Pierce's stocks, which we'd been quietly acquiring through shell companies. Another tracked David's credit card transactions, each luxury purchase adding another nail to the coffin of his supposed financial expertise. "How's the team handling the acquisition preparations?" I asked, turning to the logistics screen where dozens of names scrolled past, each representing a key player in tomorrow's endgame. "Everyone's in position," Sarah confirmed. "Legal has triple-checked every document. HR has the new organizational charts ready. Security has been briefed about potential reactions." She hesitated, then added, "Are you sure you want to handle the announcement yourself?" No, I cut her off gently. "This needs to be me. He needs to see exactly who he's been underestimating all these years." My phone buzzed, a message from David. "Working late tonight, honey. Don't wait up." I checked the monitoring screen. He and Jessica had just checked into the Ritz-Carlton downtown, using our joint account again. The man really was making this almost too easy. I pulled up the master spreadsheet I'd been maintaining for the past 5 years. Every transaction, every lie, every misappropriated dollar meticulously documented. The latest withdrawal from our retirement account, $50,000 for what he'd claimed was a investment opportunity, had actually funded a weekend trip to Paris with Jessica. First-class flights, luxury shopping, five-star dining, all paid for with the money we'd saved for our future. The board members are all confirmed for tomorrow, Sarah reported, scrolling through her notes. Including the 3 we planted 6 months ago? The vote is guaranteed. I nodded, remembering how carefully we'd orchestrated each board member's appointment. While David was busy showing off his new watches and bragging about his financial acumen, I'd been systematically positioning our allies throughout Morton & Pierce's corporate structure. What about the retirement account records? I asked, though I knew Sarah's answer would be thorough. She never missed a detail. All documented and verified by forensic accountants. $2 million in total withdrawals over the past year. We've traced every penny. Hotels, jewelry, designer clothes, that Mercedes he bought her last month. She pulled up another screen. The timing of the withdrawals correlates perfectly with their hotel stays and shopping sprees. The evidence is ironclad. I walked over to my private safe, entering the complex combination. Inside lay the original copies of every document we'd need. Bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts, surveillance photos, and most importantly, the prenuptial agreement David had insisted upon, thinking he was protecting his assets from me. The same agreement that would now protect my company from him. The divorce papers are ready, Sarah added softly, along with the restraining order, in case he reacts poorly. I thought about David's temper, carefully hidden beneath his polished exterior. I'd seen glimpses of it over the years, usually when someone challenged his authority or questioned his decisions. Tomorrow, he would face the ultimate challenge to both. Have you reviewed the security footage from their office? I asked, turning to another monitor. Sarah nodded, pulling up multiple camera feeds showing different angles of the Morton & Pierce offices. They're getting careless. Yesterday they were kissing in his office, right in front of the windows. Half the floor saw them. Good, I replied. The more witnesses, the better. I sat down at my desk, reviewing tomorrow's schedule one final time. The board meeting was set for 9 a.m. sharp. David's team had their regular morning briefing at the same time. He wouldn't even know what was happening until it was too late. By 10 a.m., the acquisition would be announced. By 10:30, security would be escorting him from the building. The press release is ready, Sarah said, displaying the draft on my screen. Morton & Pierce Financial acquired by Quantum Solutions in surprise move. The subheading made me smile. Charlotte Warren, tech industry pioneer, emerges as new CEO. What about his personal accounts? I asked, though we'd checked this yesterday. All monitored. The moment the acquisition is announced, we expect him to try accessing his executive stock options. They'll be frozen by then, of course. The same with any attempt to transfer or withdraw funds from the company accounts. I pulled up one final document, a letter I'd written to David years ago but never sent. It detailed every moment of financial abuse, every dismissive comment, every time he'd made me feel small or incapable. Tomorrow it would be delivered to his office along with the divorce papers. The car service is confirmed for morning, Sarah continued. They'll pick you up at 8 a.m. I've arranged for your favorite suit to be delivered to the office, the Armani that David doesn't know about. I smiled, thinking of the sharp black power suit hanging in my private dressing room. So different from the modest clothes I wore at home, playing the role of the financially dependent wife. One last thing, Sarah added, her expression serious. Are you absolutely sure about this timing? We could wait, gather more evidence? He just spent half our retirement savings on his mistress, I interrupted quietly, while telling me we needed to be more conservative with our spending. No more waiting. Tomorrow, David learns exactly what happens when you underestimate your wife. As night fell over Manhattan, I gathered my things, preparing to return home. One last time to the house where I'd played my part for so long. Tomorrow, the masks would come off. Tomorrow, David would learn that the wife he'd tried to keep financially dependent had built an empire right under his nose. And tomorrow, he would discover that the retirement account he'd drained to impress his mistress was nothing compared to what he was about to lose. Dawn broke over Manhattan with the same predictability as David's lies. "Early meeting, honey," he'd mumbled, kissing my cheek before rushing out the door at 6 a.m. I watched from our bedroom window as his Mercedes disappeared down the street, knowing he was headed not to the office, but to the Four Seasons for a breakfast meeting with Jessica. The breaking point hadn't come with a dramatic revelation or a heated confrontation. Instead, it arrived in the form of an innocent envelope that had been misdelivered to our home rather than his office. A receipt from Tiffany & Co. for a heart-shaped diamond pendant, $86,000 charged to our joint account. The same account he'd told me was too depleted for me to buy a new laptop for my little online business. I sat at my vanity, methodically applying makeup that would need to last through what promised to be a very long day. My phone buzzed with messages from Sarah. Security teams in position. Board members arriving early. Legal team standing by. Each notification another piece of the elaborate trap we'd set. The catalyst that set everything in motion had been a conversation I'd overheard 3 days ago. David, thinking I was at my weekly yoga class, had brought Jessica to our home, for an afternoon tryst. I'd returned early, silently entering through the garden door when I heard them. In his study. "But what about your wife?" Jessica's voice had drifted down the hallway. "Won't she notice the money missing?" David's laugh had been cruel and familiar. "Charlotte, she doesn't even know how to check the account balances. I've got her convinced that managing money is beyond her capabilities. Trust me, baby, she'll never figure it out." I'd stood there, designer yoga mat in hand, listening as they planned a summer vacation to the Amalfi Coast, paid for with the money that was supposed to fund our retirement. That evening, I'd made my final decision. The plan I'd been building for years would be executed, not in some distant future, but now. "The board meeting is confirmed for 9 a.m. Sarah's voice came through my earpiece as I drove toward the city. Not in my usual modest sedan, but in the sleek Aston Martin I kept in a private garage. David's team is gathering for their morning briefing right now. I pulled into my reserved parking space, the one David didn't know existed, in the Dace underground garage of our office building. The private elevator required both a keycard and fingerprint scan, ensuring no one would accidentally discover the CEO of Quantum Solutions was the same woman David regularly mocked for her financial ignorance. "Status update," I commanded softly, as the elevator ascended. David and Jessica arrived separately but within 2 minutes of each other, Sarah reported. "They're in his office now, doors closed, blinds drawn. Security cameras show unprofessional behavior. Document everything," I instructed, though I knew Sarah already would. "Any unusual account activity this morning?" He tried to transfer another $50,000 from the retirement account about an hour ago. The transaction was flagged and held as planned. He's made 3 calls to the bank already. The elevator opened directly into my private office suite. The wall of monitors displayed various security feeds, including one showing David's office. He was at his desk now, face flushed with anger, as he argued with someone on the phone. Probably the bank questioning his suspicious transfer. "His mother called," Sarah added as I changed into my power suit. "Apparently, he promised to buy her a vacation home, using money he doesn't know he no longer has access to." I smiled at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The Armani suit was a far cry from the modest clothes David was used to seeing me in. The Charlotte he knew would never spend this much on clothing. But then, the Charlotte he knew was a carefully constructed illusion, designed to keep him underestimating. "Me? Morton and Pierce stock?" I asked, settling behind my desk. "Up slightly in pre-market trading. They have no idea what's coming." Sarah handed me a stack of documents requiring my signature. "The press is already gathering in the lobby. Someone leaked that a major announcement was coming. I reviewed the final acquisition paperwork one last time. Every detail had been checked and double-checked. Every I dotted, every T crossed. In less than an hour, I would sign these papers and take control not just of Morton and Pierce Financial, but of every aspect of David's professional life. "Show me the retirement account records," I requested. Sarah pulled them up on the main screen. The history of withdrawals told a damning story. Over $2 million, systematically drained over the past year. Hotels, jewelry, designer clothes, all for Jessica. The latest attempted transfer would have paid for their planned summer vacation. "He's getting anxious," Sarah noted, watching David pace in his office. "That's the fourth call he's made to the bank. They're following protocol, telling him the system is down for maintenance." I checked my watch, 8:45 a.m. 15 minutes. Until the board meeting that would change everything. Through the security feed, I could see board members arriving, being escorted to the main conference room. None of them knew that the mysterious CEO of Quantum Solutions was about to be revealed, as the wife of one of their senior executives. "Jessica's getting nervous, too," Sarah observed. "She keeps checking her phone, probably wondering why the latest transfer hasn't hit her account." I stood, smoothing my skirt and checking my appearance one final time. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the submissive wife David thought he'd married. This woman radiated power, confidence, and most importantly, complete financial independence. "It's time," I said softly, gathering the acquisition papers and my notes. "Is everything in place?" "Security is stationed at every exit. IT has frozen. All executive access codes. The press release is ready to go the moment you sign the papers. And the divorce papers," Sarah paused, allowing herself a small smile, "are ready to be served the moment the acquisition is announced." I took one last look at the security feed showing David's office. He was still arguing with the bank, his face red with frustration. In 15 minutes, his world would implode. His career, his reputation, his carefully constructed image of financial superiority, all of it would crumble. "Let's go," I said, heading for the door. "It's time David learned what happens when you underestimate your wife and steal her retirement." The executive bathroom in my private office suite held more than just the usual amenities. Behind a hidden panel lay everything I needed for my transformation from David's financially naive wife into the CEO of Quantum Solutions. I stood before the full-length mirror, watching as the last traces of Charlotte Morrison disappeared. Gone were the modest clothes and subtle makeup he was used to seeing. Instead, I wore a perfectly tailored black Armani suit that cost more than the watch he'd bought Jessica last month. My hair, usually pulled back in a simple ponytail, was now expertly styled in a sophisticated chignon. The diamond earrings, not from David, but purchased with my own money, caught the light as I turned my head. "The board is assembled," Sarah reported through my earpiece. "And David just tried another bank transfer. He's becoming quite agitated." I smiled at my reflection, applying a final coat of deep red lipstick, the same shade I'd worn the day I founded Quantum Solutions. "His access has been completely restricted?" "Yes. The bank is following our instructions perfectly. His calls are being routed to a special team that's been briefed on the situation. They're telling him it's a system-wide technical issue that should be resolved soon." I opened a small safe hidden behind an abstract painting, removing my CEO credentials and the diamond-encrusted watch I reserved for major corporate events. The timepiece had cost nearly as much as David's entire collection, though he had no idea I owned it. Each diamond caught the light, a reminder of every patronizing comment he'd made about my financial capabilities. "Jessica is getting nervous," Sarah continued, monitoring the security feeds. "She's called David 3 times in the last 10 minutes. Apparently, she put a deposit down on a luxury condo, expecting today's transfer to cover the balance. Show me their latest conversation," I requested, settling into my executive chair. The security feed appeared on my main screen. David was pacing in his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Baby, I don't know what's happening," he was saying. "The money should have been there hours ago. Just wait before signing anything else." I checked my watch, the same one he'd once told me was too complicated for me to understand. "Time check?" 8 minutes until the board meeting, Sarah confirmed. "Security teams are in position. Legal is standing by with both sets of papers, acquisition and divorce. Press is gathering in the lobby." The transformation wasn't just physical. With each passing moment, I felt the last vestiges of my submissive wife persona falling away. This was who I really was. Not the woman who supposedly couldn't manage a checkbook, but the financial powerhouse who had built a tech empire from scratch. "Your executive team is assembled in the side conference room," Sarah reported. "They're ready to move the moment you give the signal." I stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan. 15 floors below, I could see David's reserved parking space, his Mercedes gleaming in the morning sun. By noon, that space would belong to someone else. "Show me the retirement account one more time," I requested. Sarah pulled up the records on a side screen. The history of withdrawals told our story better than words ever could. $2 million systematically drained while he gaslit me about being financially irresponsible. Each withdrawal matched perfectly with a gift or experience for Jessica. The watches, the jewelry, the luxury vacations. "Latest surveillance?" I asked, though I could guess what I'd see. The security feed showed David and Jessica in his office, their conversation becoming heated as they realized their latest attempt to access funds had failed. Jessica was gesturing frantically at her phone, probably showing him the pending payments she couldn't cover. "The transformation is more than just appearance," Sarah observed, watching me adjust my suit jacket. "You seem lighter somehow." "Freedom does that," I replied, thinking of the years I'd spent playing a role. No more pretending to be less than I am. No more nodding along while he makes financial decisions with my money. My phone buzzed. A message from David. "Hi, honey. Might be home late tonight. Don't wait up." Even now, he was laying the groundwork for another evening with Jessica, unaware that by tonight, he wouldn't have a home to come back to. "Hair and makeup team standing by," Sarah reminded me. "Though honestly, you look perfect already, like a CEO should." I smiled, remembering all the times David had commented on my simple appearance. "My low-maintenance wife," he'd say proudly. To his friends, as if my modest presentation was another sign of his financial dominance. The woman in the reflection now radiated power and confidence. Every element of my appearance had been chosen to command respect, from the architecturally structured suit to the subtle but expensive accessories. The physical transformation was the final piece of a plan years in the making. 2 minutes, Sarah announced. "The board is getting restless." I gathered the acquisition papers, feeling the weight of them in my hands. Years of planning, of playing the dutiful wife while building something extraordinary, had led to this moment. "Show me the office feeds one last time," I requested. The monitors displayed various angles of the Morton and Pierce offices. Board members, settling into their seats, checking their phones, unaware their company was about to change hands. David in his office, still trying desperately to access our retirement account. Jessica pacing beside him, her designer heels, bought with my money, clicking against the hardwood floors. "It's time," Sarah said softly. I took one final look in the mirror. The transformation was complete. Gone was Charlotte Morrison, the financially naive wife. In her place stood Charlotte Warren, CEO of Quantum Solutions and soon-to-be owner of Morton and Pierce Financial. "Let's go," I said, heading for the door. Time to show David exactly who he's been underestimating all these years. The clicking of my Louboutins against the marble floor echoed through the private corridor, a sound of authority, of power, of revenge served cold. In less than 5 minutes, I would walk into that boardroom, not as David's wife, but as their, new CEO. The transformation was complete. The mask was off, and David's world was about to shatter. The mahogany doors of Morton and Pierce's main boardroom felt cool beneath my palm as I paused for one final moment. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouettes of board members settling into their seats, unaware that their world was about to shift dramatically. Sarah stood beside me, tablet ready, a slight smile playing at her lips. "David's still in his office," she whispered. "He's now threatening legal action against the bank." I checked my reflection in the polished brass door plate. "Send in the first, team." Right on cue, our legal department entered the boardroom through the side entrance. 6 lawyers in impeccable suits, each carrying identical leather portfolios containing the acquisition documents. The board members straightened in their chairs, confusion evident on their faces. This wasn't on their agenda. "It's time," I said softly, squaring my shoulders. With practiced precision, I pushed open both doors, my Louboutins clicking authoritatively against the marble floor as I strode to the head of the table. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the woman they'd never seen before, yet who moved, with the confidence of someone who owned the space. "Good morning, gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying easily across the stunned silence. "I'm Charlotte Warren, CEO of Quantum Solutions, though some of you might know me better as Charlotte Morrison." The effect was immediate. Several board members jerked in their seats, recognition dawning as they connected my face to the Christmas party photos on David's desk. The wife he constantly belittled for her financial ignorance was standing before them in a power suit worth more than their monthly salaries. "Mrs. Morrison?" Richard Blake, the board chairman, found his voice first. "I don't understand. This meeting was called to—" "This meeting," I interrupted smoothly, "was called to formalize Quantum Solutions' acquisition of Morton and Pierce Financial." I nodded to the lawyers, who began distributing documents. "You'll find everything in—" "Order!" The boardroom erupted in confused murmurs as papers were passed around. Through the wall of windows, I could see David still in his office, now practically shouting into his phone. "Perfect timing. Sarah," I spoke into my earpiece, "please escort Mr. Morrison to join us. I believe he should be present for this." Moments later, David burst through the door, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell is going on? The bank's frozen our accounts and—" He stopped dead, finally registering my presence at the head of his company's boardroom. "Charlotte? What? What are you doing here?" I smiled, the same patronizing smile he'd given me countless times. "Just handling some financial matters, dear. You know, those complicated things you always said were beyond my capabilities." "I don't understand," he stammered, looking frantically between me and the board members. "What is this?" "Perhaps you should take a seat," I suggested, gesturing to an empty chair. "This concerns you directly." As he sank into the chair, I noticed his left hand shaking, that telltale sign of his nervousness. "Sarah, please invite our final guest to join us." The side door opened again, and Jessica walked in, her confident stride faltering as she took in the scene. "Mr. Morrison asked me to bring the quarterly reports," she began weakly. "Actually," I cut in, "I asked for you to join us." "Please sit." I gestured to the chair furthest from David. "This concerns you as well." "Charlotte," David tried again, attempting to regain his usual authoritative tone. "Whatever this is—" "This," I interrupted, lifting a thick folder, "is a complete record of every withdrawal you've made from our retirement account over the past year. $2 million, David, spent on hotels, jewelry, and designer clothes, all for your young assistant here." Jessica's face went pale. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I've been building Quantum Solutions for the past 5 years," I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent room. While you were busy stealing our retirement to impress your mistress, I was creating something extraordinary. Would you like to know our current market valuation, David? Since you're so good with numbers. He remained silent, his face ashen. $50 billion, I announced. That little online business you mocked? It's now worth $50 billion. And as of this morning, it owns Morton & Pierce Financial. The boardroom erupted in chaos. David jumped to his feet, his chair clattering backward. You can't do this. Actually, I smiled, sliding the acquisition papers toward him. I already have. The board vote was merely a formality. Quantum Solutions has been buying shares through shell companies for months. We own 51% of Morton & Pierce as of this morning. You're lying, he sputtered. This is impossible. You don't even know how. To balance a checkbook. I pulled up the main screen behind me, displaying years of financial records, corporate acquisitions, and growth charts. I know exactly how to balance a checkbook, David. I also know how to build a tech empire, acquire a financial institution, and track every penny my husband stole from our retirement account. Jessica stood up suddenly, her designer purse clutched to her chest. I should go. Sit down, I commanded, my tone leaving no room for argument. We're not finished. Sarah, please distribute the second set of documents. Sarah moved efficiently, around the table, placing new folders in front of David and the board members. David's face crumpled as he opened his divorce papers, complete with evidence of his financial infidelity and affair. You'll find everything quite thoroughly documented, I continued. The hotels, the gifts, the unauthorized withdrawals. Your access to all company and personal accounts has been suspended pending investigation of financial misconduct. You can't prove anything. He tried weakly. I nodded to Sarah, who activated the room's screens. Security footage began playing. David and Jessica in various compromising situations around the office, followed by credit card statements showing exactly how he'd spent our retirement savings. As of this moment, I announced to the stunned room, David Morrison and Jessica Parker are terminated from Morton & Pierce Financial, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear out your offices. I turned to the board members. Gentlemen, we'll reconvene in an hour to discuss the company's new direction. For now, please excuse us. I need a moment with my soon-to-be ex-husband. The board members filed out quickly, followed by a tearful Jessica. As the door closed behind them, David and I were left alone in the massive boardroom. Why? He whispered, his arrogance finally cracking. Why go to all this trouble? I walked to the window, looking out over the city I now partially owned. Because you taught me an invaluable lesson, David. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. You showed me you were a thief and a liar, so I built an empire right under your nose. Consider it the ultimate investment strategy. The aftermath of the revelation unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Through the boardrooms, glass walls, I watched as security escorted David and Jessica to their offices to collect their belongings. Their faces wore matching expressions of shock and humiliation as they packed their personal items into cardboard boxes under careful supervision. His corporate credit cards have been deactivated, Sarah reported, checking her tablet. All building, access revoked, email accounts suspended. IT is already doing a deep dive into their computers. I remained at the window, savoring the moment. What's the initial reaction? The news is spreading through the building like wildfire. The stock trading floor is in chaos. Someone leaked that Morton & Pierce had been acquired. Trading on our shares has been temporarily halted pending the official announcement. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications. David's mother had already called 3 times, probably desperate to understand how her son's financially illiterate wife had just become his boss. I watched as David, now under security escort, tried calling me from the elevator. The call went straight to my blocked numbers folder. Jessica's having a meltdown in HR, Sarah continued, pulling up a security feed. She's demanding her final paycheck and threatened to sue for wrongful termination. Our legal team is presenting her with evidence of her involvement in misappropriating company resources. Through another security feed, I could see David in his office, frantically shoving items into a box. His hands shook as he tried to access his computer one last time, only to find his credentials revoked. The same computer where he'd written countless emails to Jessica planning their rendezvous with my retirement money. The prenup? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Ironclad, Sarah confirmed. Your lawyers were thorough. Since he violated the fidelity clause and committed financial fraud, he forfeits any claim to your assets, including your shares in both companies. A commotion drew my attention back to David's office. He was arguing with security, gesturing wildly at his laptop. That's company property, sir, one guard was saying firmly. All devices must remain for IT audit. His phone? I inquired. Also company property, Sarah smiled. He'll be issued a basic flip phone to handle personal matters during the transition. No more luxury smartphones paid for with corporate funds. I watched as reality began to sink in for both of them. Jessica, still in HR, was learning that her company car, a Mercedes SUV David had authorized with corporate funds, would need to be returned immediately. David, finally accepting he couldn't take his laptop, was realizing all his personal files, photos, and emails were now property of the company he no longer worked for. The retirement account records have been forwarded to the SEC, Sarah reported. They're particularly interested in the pattern of withdrawals just under the reporting threshold. Preliminary investigation suggests potential criminal charges for financial fraud. Through the glass, I could see Jessica running toward David's office, her mascara streaked with tears. Security intercepted her smoothly, redirecting her toward the exit. Her designer handbag, purchased with my retirement savings, slipped from her shoulder, spilling its contents across the marble floor. Their personal accounts? I asked, watching as Jessica scrambled to gather her belongings. Frozen, Sarah confirmed. The evidence of fraud was sufficient for the banks to place holds pending investigation. David's attempt to transfer funds this morning triggered several red flags. His credit cards are declining as we speak. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. Security cameras showed David at the parking garage payment kiosk, his credit card being rejected. His face grew redder with each declined transaction. The Mercedes? I inquired. Being repossessed as we speak. It was purchased through a corporate shell company he created using misappropriated funds. The same goes for Jessica's car. Sarah paused, checking her tablet. They'll both be taking taxis home. I turned back to the boardroom table, now cleared except for the morning's papers. The acquisition documents were already being filed with the SEC. By market close, the business world would know that Charlotte Warren, the secret CEO of Quantum Solutions, had orchestrated one of the most dramatic corporate takeovers in recent history. David's executive team? I asked, though Sarah was already pulling up the information. Most are cooperating fully, trying to save their own positions. 3 have already provided evidence of David's inappropriate relationships with other employees and misuse of corporate funds. It seems he had a pattern of buying loyalty with company money. Through the security feeds, I watched as David finally reached the lobby. The same security guard who had greeted him cheerfully every morning for years now stopped him, requesting his employee badge. His hands shook as he surrendered the small piece of plastic that had represented his power in this building. Jessica's apartment? I inquired, knowing Sarah would have the details. The down payment she made this morning? Sarah smiled slightly. Bounced, along with several other recent purchases. Apparently, she was quite confident about receiving today's transfer from your retirement account. My phone buzzed again. David trying to reach me through his mother's phone now. I declined the call, watching as he stood on the sidewalk outside the building, his box of belongings at his feet, reality finally setting in. The press release goes out in 5 minutes, Sarah reported. All major financial news networks are standing by. The story of the secretly successful wife taking over her financially abusive husband's company is already generating significant buzz. I nodded, straightening my suit jacket. Schedule the all-hands meeting for this afternoon. The employees deserve to hear directly from their new CEO about the company's direction. Through the windows, I could see David and Jessica having a heated argument on the sidewalk. Her gestures were becoming increasingly frantic as she presumably realized all the luxury items he'd promised her were about to disappear. Their colleagues? I asked, though I could guess the response. Already distancing themselves, Sarah confirmed. Amazing how quickly people remember all the times they witnessed inappropriate behavior once the power dynamic shifts. We've received dozens of emails documenting past incidents. I gathered my materials, preparing for the board meeting that would outline the new corporate structure. Send the final notice to their attorneys, I instructed. Make it clear that any attempt to dispute their terminations will result in criminal charges for financial fraud. The dominoes were falling exactly as planned. By sunset, David and Jessica would be unemployed, under investigation, and cut off from the wealth they'd taken for granted. Their carefully constructed world of luxury and deception was crumbling, one piece at a time. One last thing, Sarah added, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. David's membership at the country club? It was a corporate perk. Security is collecting his access cards now. The next 48 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of consequences. I sat in my CEO's office, watching multiple screens as justice played out across different venues. The main monitor showed CNBC's breaking news coverage. Tech titan Charlotte Warren acquires husband's firm amid financial misconduct allegations. The SEC investigators are here, Sarah announced, entering with her ever-present tablet. They're particularly interested in the pattern of retirement account withdrawals. Apparently, David's method of keeping transactions just under the reporting threshold is a textbook case of structured fraud. I nodded, watching another screen where David sat in a stark conference room, facing two serious-looking federal agents. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by nervous fidgeting as they laid out document after document, showing his financial misconduct. His lawyer quit, Sarah added, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Apparently, the evidence was too overwhelming. He's scrambling to find new representation, but firms are reluctant to take his case given the publicity. The financial fallout was spreading through their social circles like wildfire. The country club had already revoked David's membership, citing their moral character clause. 3 charity boards he sat on had requested his immediate resignation. His carefully cultivated image of financial acumen was unraveling thread by thread. Jessica's interview with HR was enlightening, Sarah continued, pulling up a transcript. Once she realized the severity of the situation, she started talking. Provided details about other corporate funds David had misappropriated, other women before her. The pattern goes back years. My phone buzzed with a message from our legal team. The divorce proceedings were being expedited given the evidence of financial fraud and infidelity. David's attempts to claim any portion of my assets had been firmly rejected by the court. The forensic accountants finished their preliminary review, Sarah reported. They've identified over $3 million in misappropriated funds, not just from our retirement account but from corporate accounts as well. David was running quite a scheme. Through the security feeds, I watched as federal agents boxed up files from David's office. His computer had yielded a treasure trove of evidence: emails planning luxury trips with Jessica, transfers of company funds to personal accounts, even attempts to hide his tracks. His mother is on line 3, Sarah noted. She's called 16 times since yesterday. Apparently, the vacation home he promised to buy her isn't happening now that his assets are frozen. I declined the call, focusing instead on the CNN interview playing on another screen. A financial expert was analyzing the situation. This is one of the most remarkable cases of corporate justice I've seen. While Mr. Morrison was draining their retirement account to fund his affair, his wife was building a multi-billion-dollar technology company. The irony is extraordinary. The board meeting transcript has been released to the SEC, Sarah continued. They're particularly interested in the moment David realized you owned the company. Apparently, the look on his face is described in detail in the official minutes. Another screen showed Jessica leaving her lawyer's office, her designer sunglasses unable to hide her tears. Her attempts to claim she was an innocent party had crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence. Credit card statements showed she had actively participated in spending retirement account funds, even choosing some of the more expensive items herself. The criminal investigation is proceeding quickly, Sarah noted. The prosecutors are particularly interested in the structured withdrawals. Apparently, keeping transactions just under $10,000 to avoid reporting requirements is a serious federal offense. I turned to another monitor showing David attempting to check into a hotel, his credit cards declining one after another. The luxury watches he'd bought Jessica with our retirement savings would probably need to be sold soon to pay for basic expenses. Their corporate emails have been reviewed, Sarah added. It found messages discussing how to hide the transfers from you. There's one particularly damning exchange where David brags about how easy it is to manipulate his financially naive wife. The justice being served wasn't just financial. Their reputations, so carefully built on David's illusion of financial expertise, were in tatters. Former colleagues were coming forward with stories of his arrogance, his mismanagement, his inappropriate relationships with subordinates. The retirement account transfers have been reversed, Sarah reported. The bank's fraud department was able to claw back most of the recent withdrawals. They're also investigating several large purchases made with corporate cards. My phone buzzed. Again. A message from David's sister this time. She'd seen the news and wanted to apologize for all the times she'd participated in his patronizing behavior about my financial capabilities. Her message joined dozens of others from people suddenly realizing they'd underestimated me for years. The SEC wants to use this case as an example, Sarah noted, reviewing a new email. They're particularly interested in the intersection of personal financial fraud and corporate misconduct. Your documentation of everything made their job much easier. Through the security feed, I watched as Jessica was escorted from her luxury condo, the one she could no longer afford now that David's financial support had evaporated. The movers were already there, repossessing furniture that had been purchased with misappropriated funds. The official charges are being filed tomorrow, Sarah continued. Multiple counts of financial fraud, misappropriation of corporate resources, structured transactions to avoid reporting requirements. The prosecutors are confident about their case. I nodded, watching another screen where financial news analysts were dissecting the story. The business world was fascinated by the contrast. The wife, supposedly too financially inept to manage a checkbook, had built a tech empire while her husband stole their retirement savings to impress his mistress. David's attempts to access his frozen accounts have been logged, Sarah added. The bank's fraud department is monitoring everything. He's made 37 attempts since yesterday to transfer funds, each one documented for the investigation. The justice being served was comprehensive and public. Every aspect of their fraudulent behavior was being exposed, examined, and prosecuted. David's carefully constructed image as a financial expert was being dismantled piece by piece, replaced by the reality of a man who stole retirement savings to fund his affair. The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow, Sarah reminded me. All major networks will be covering it. Your story of building a tech empire while documenting your husband's financial fraud has captured everyone's attention. I turned back to the main screen, where David's booking photo was now being shown on national news. The man who had spent years belittling my financial capabilities was now facing serious federal charges, while his supposedly financially illiterate wife had become one of the most powerful CEOs in the tech industry. Justice, it seemed, had a delicious sense of irony. By the end of the first week, the impact of my revelation rippled through every aspect of both companies and our personal lives. I stood in what had been David's corner office, now transformed into a temporary meeting space, watching the sun set over the Manhattan skyline. The view was different from up here, but not as impressive as my CEO suite 15 floors above. "The numbers are in from the first week," Sarah reported, entering with a stack of reports. Morton and Pierce stock actually rose 12% after the acquisition announcement. The market apparently appreciates strong leadership and zero tolerance for financial misconduct. I smiled, remembering how David had always claimed women couldn't handle high-level financial decisions. Now his former company was thriving under female leadership, while he was fighting to keep his assets unfrozen. His appeal to unlock the accounts was denied, Sarah continued, pulling up the court documents on her tablet. The judge was particularly unmoved by his claim that he needed access to maintain his standard of living. Apparently, living off stolen retirement funds isn't considered a protected lifestyle. Through the security feeds, I watched the ongoing transformation of both companies. The toxic culture David had fostered was being systematically dismantled. 3 more executives had been terminated for enabling his behavior, their offices now occupied by qualified women who had previously been overlooked for promotion. Jessica attempted to sell some of the jewelry, Sarah noted, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. The flagship Cartier store has been notified that those items are subject to federal investigation. They refused the transaction and reported her to the authorities. My phone buzzed with another message from David's mother. She'd progressed from angry denial to desperate pleading, begging me to drop the charges and release some funds. Her messages went unanswered, just like her son's increasingly frantic attempts to contact me. The audit team found something interesting, Sarah continued. Apparently, David had been maintaining a secret office in Midtown, paid for with corporate funds, of course. We had it cleaned out this morning. More evidence for the prosecution. The personal fallout was equally dramatic. David had been forced to move in with his mother, his access to our homes revoked, his keys changed, his security codes disabled. The luxury apartment he'd kept for meetings with Jessica had been reclaimed by the corporate audit team. His new lawyer isn't optimistic, Sarah reported, checking another message. The evidence is overwhelming, and David's attempts to justify the retirement account withdrawals as investment decisions aren't playing well with investigators. I turned to another monitor showing the employee satisfaction surveys from both companies. The change in leadership had been welcomed, particularly by female employees who spoke of feeling heard and valued for the first time in their careers. The press coverage continues to be favorable, Sarah noted. Forbes wants to do a cover story. The Queen of Stealth Wealth, how Charlotte Warren built a tech empire while her husband stole their retirement. Time magazine is interested as well. Through the security feed, I watched as another moving truck arrived at Jessica's condo. Most of her luxury items had been repossessed. The rest would be sold to pay legal fees. The young assistant who thought she'd found her sugar daddy was learning an expensive lesson about karma. The corporate culture transformation is proceeding ahead of schedule, Sarah continued. The new harassment reporting system has already identified 2 more problematic managers. They'll be terminated by end of day. My phone lit up with a notification. David attempting to use his corporate gym membership. Another small humiliation as he was turned away, his access revoked, his status as a privileged executive now just a memory. His country club locker has been cleared out, Sarah added. They found several items purchased with corporate funds, including a set of golf clubs he claimed as a business expense. More evidence for the prosecution. The professional consequences were mounting daily. David's former colleagues, seeing which way the wind was blowing, had begun providing statements about his pattern of financial misconduct. Each new revelation strengthened the prosecution's case. The merger integration team has finished their initial assessment, Sarah reported. Morton and Pierce's technology infrastructure needs significant upgrading. David had been cutting corners, pocketing the allocated funds for personal use. I nodded, watching another screen where financial news analysts were praising the acquisition. The stock prices of both companies had risen as the market responded to strong, ethical leadership replacing corruption and mismanagement. Jessica's attempt to claim whistleblower status was rejected, Sarah noted with satisfaction. The prosecutors weren't impressed by her sudden desire to cooperate after the evidence of her active participation came to light. The social fallout was perhaps the most satisfying. David's carefully cultivated image as a financial genius had crumbled completely. Former friends were distancing themselves. Country club acquaintances pretended not to see him. Business associates had blocked his calls. His alma mater removed him from their business school advisory board, Sarah continued. They're also rescinding his Distinguished Alumni Award in light of the federal charges. Through another security feed, I watched as David's former assistant cleared out her desk, supervised by HR. All those designer outfits and luxury accessories, bought with my retirement savings, couldn't protect her from the consequences of her choices. The retirement account has been fully restored, Sarah reported. The bank's fraud team was able to recover most of the funds. They're using this case to train their staff on detecting structured withdrawal patterns. My phone buzzed again. Another desperate message from David, this time through his sister's phone. He was offering to explain everything, if I would. Just meet with him. The message joined hundreds of others in my blocked folder. The employee town hall is scheduled for tomorrow, Sarah reminded me. People are eager to hear directly from their new CEO about the company's direction. I smiled, thinking of all the times David had mockingly suggested I take a basic financial literacy course. Now his former employees would be learning about corporate governance and ethical leadership from the woman he'd underestimated for years. The immediate impact of my revelation had exceeded even my careful planning. In just 1 week, we'd transformed 2 companies, exposed years of financial misconduct, and completely upended the lives of those who had thought themselves untouchable. 1 month after the takeover, both Quantum Solutions and Morton & Pierce were undergoing dramatic transformations. I stood in my CEO suite, now spanning the top 2 floors of the building, reviewing the changes on multiple monitors. The old boys club atmosphere had been replaced by a culture of merit and inclusion, and the results were already showing. The first quarter results under new management are impressive, Sarah reported, bringing in the latest financial statements. Morton & Pierce's efficiency is up 40% since removing David's inner circle. Turns out, merit-based promotion works better than promoting based on golf club membership. I smiled, remembering David's insistence that certain clients would only work with traditional, male, financial advisors. Those same clients were now praising our innovative approach and improved performance. The Women's Leadership Initiative has launched, Sarah continued, pulling up the program details. Over 50 employees who were previously passed over for promotion under David's management have been enrolled in executive training. Their potential had been there all along. It just needed someone to recognize it. Through the security feeds, I watched the ongoing transformation. The executive floor, once a bastion of expensive suits and old-school networking, now buzzed with diverse teams collaborating on innovative projects. The conference room where David had held court with his inner circle had been converted into an open workspace for rising talent. The corporate culture survey results are in, Sarah noted, displaying charts on one of the monitors. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. The anonymous reporting system has been particularly well received. People finally feel safe reporting misconduct. My phone buzzed with another press request. Harvard Business Review wanted to do a case study on our corporate transformation. They were particularly interested in how removing toxic leadership had unleashed previously suppressed talent, the FI. Mentorship program has exceeded expectations, Sarah continued. Over 200 employees have signed up to either mentor or be mentored. Many of them are women who say they finally feel supported in their career aspirations. The rebuilding wasn't just organizational, it was physical too. David's elaborate executive dining room had been converted into a collaborative workspace. The private elevator he'd reserved for his inner circle now served as additional access for all employees. The technology integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, Sarah reported. Once we removed the outdated systems David insisted on keeping, our IT team was able to implement modern solutions. Efficiency has improved dramatically. Through another monitor, I watched as Jessica's former office was transformed into a training center for new financial analysts. The designer furniture she'd demanded, paid for with corporate funds, had been replaced with practical workstations. Her wall of vanity photos with celebrities had given way to screens displaying real-time market data. The client feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, Sarah noted, reviewing the latest surveys. They appreciate dealing with professionals who were promoted based on competence rather than country club connections. Our client retention rate is at 98%. I turned to a screen showing the trading floor. The aggressive, testosterone-driven atmosphere David had cultivated had been replaced by focused professionalism. Terms like man up and grow a pair had been banned from corporate communications, replaced by actual performance metrics. The retirement planning division has been completely revamped, Sarah continued. Ironically, David's misuse of retirement funds inspired a company-wide initiative on retirement security. We're now offering enhanced benefits and financial education to all employees. My phone lit up with another notification, a message from one of David's former clients. They were thanking us for uncovering the financial misconduct and praising the improved service under new management. The message joined hundreds of similar testimonials. The Corporate Responsibility Program is gaining recognition, Sarah reported. Our initiative to fund women-led startups has already identified 10 promising companies. We're turning David's financial abuse into opportunities for others to succeed. The rebuilding extended to physical spaces as well. The executive floor's gentleman's lounge, complete with leather chairs and expensive scotch, had been converted into a wellness center open to all employees. The hunting trophies David had displayed were replaced with artwork from emerging artists. The professional development program is thriving, Sarah noted. Remember that analyst David refused to promote because she was too aggressive? She's now heading our most successful trading team. Through the security feeds, I watched as another group of employees participated in our new financial literacy program. The irony wasn't lost on me. The wife David had claimed couldn't understand money was now ensuring everyone in her companies had access to financial education. The corporate giving program has been restructured, Sarah continued. Instead of David's preferred charities, mostly country clubs and alumni associations, we're focusing on organizations that support financial literacy and women's empowerment. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from a young intern thanking me for the new mentorship program. Under David's leadership, interns had been treated as personal assistants. Now they were receiving real training and career guidance. The work-life balance initiatives are showing results, Sarah reported. Sick days are down 30% since we implemented flexible scheduling. Turns out, people are more productive when they're not forced to choose between family and career. The transformation wasn't just about removing toxic elements. It was about building something better in their place. Every policy David had used to maintain his power was being replaced with systems that empowered and supported all employees. The financial advisory team has been revitalized, Sarah noted. Remember how David claimed women clients weren't sophisticated enough for complex investments? Our new diverse advisory team has brought in more high-net-worth clients in 1 month than his team did in a year. I smiled, watching another screen where a team meeting was in progress. The participants were engaged in actual discussion, not just nodding along with the highest-paid person in the room, David's preferred management style. The rebuilding process was more than corporate restructuring. It was healing. Every positive change erased another trace of David's toxic legacy, replacing it with something stronger and more inclusive. 6 months after the takeover, I stood in my penthouse office, watching the sunset over Manhattan. The wall of monitors told a story of transformation, not just of 2 companies, but of lives changed and lessons learned. David's federal trial was approaching, while both Quantum Solutions and Morton & Pierce were thriving under new leadership. "The final numbers are in," Sarah announced, entering with her tablet. "Both companies have shown record growth this quarter. Turns out removing toxic leadership and empowering talented people is good for business." I smiled, turning from the window. The view from the top was different now, but so was everything else. The aftermath of my revelation had rippled far beyond our immediate circle. David had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of financial fraud. His attempt to paint himself as a victim of circumstance had crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence. He was facing significant prison time, his reputation destroyed, his future in the industry permanently ruined. Jessica's tell-all interview aired this morning, Sarah reported, pulling up the video. She's positioning herself as a cautionary tale about the dangers of workplace manipulation. The irony of her using designer clothes bought with stolen retirement funds for the interview wasn't lost on viewers. The personal consequences had been complete and irreversible. David's mother had finally stopped calling, her social standing damaged beyond repair by her son's actions. Their country club friends had evaporated, the luxury lifestyle built on stolen money now just a memory. The retirement account restoration program has been implemented across both companies, Sarah continued. We're now offering enhanced retirement benefits and financial education to all employees. Several other firms have approached us about adopting similar programs. Through the monitors, I watched the ongoing transformation of both companies. The toxic culture David had cultivated had been replaced by something stronger, more inclusive, more successful. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, productivity had soared, and innovation flourished. The Women's Leadership Initiative has expanded, Sarah noted. We're now partnering with universities to mentor female business students. Your story has become a case study in corporate governance and personal empowerment. My phone buzzed. Another message from a young professional, thanking me for sharing my story. Women across industries had found inspiration in how I'd built an empire while documenting my husband's financial abuse. The lesson wasn't just about revenge, it was about patience, strategy, and believing in yourself. David's sentencing is next week, Sarah reminded me. The prosecutors are pushing for the maximum penalty. His attempts to justify stealing retirement funds as protecting you didn't impress the judge. I thought about the years I'd spent playing a role, pretending to be less than I was while building something extraordinary. The patience it had taken, the careful documentation, the strategic planning, all leading to this moment of complete transformation. The corporate culture handbook has been completely rewritten, Sarah reported. No more informal boys' club. Decisions, no more promotions based on golf handicaps. Everything is merit-based, transparent, and inclusive. Through the security feeds, I watched both companies operating seamlessly under new management. The executive floors, once dominated by David's inner circle, now buzzed with diverse teams collaborating on innovative projects. The change wasn't just cosmetic, it was fundamental. Your Forbes cover story hit newsstands this morning, Sarah mentioned, displaying the magazine. The headline read, "The Silent CEO, How Charlotte Warren Built a Tech Empire While Documenting Her Husband's Financial Fraud." The lessons learned had extended far beyond our immediate situation. Companies across industries were examining their corporate cultures, their promotion practices, their handling of retirement funds. My story had become a catalyst for change. The final audit of David's tenure is complete, Sarah added. The pattern of financial misconduct was even more extensive than we initially thought. The SEC is using it as a case study in their fraud detection training. I turned back to the window, remembering all the times David had patronizingly explained basic financial concepts to me, never suspecting I was building something far beyond his comprehension. The wisdom gained wasn't just about finance. It was about recognizing your own worth. The employee support programs have expanded, Sarah continued. Financial literacy workshops, leadership training, mentorship opportunities. We're turning David's abuse of power into tools for empowerment. Through another monitor, I watched as Jessica cleared out her luxury condo, now being sold to pay legal fees. The designer clothes and expensive jewelry, all bought with my retirement savings, hadn't provided the security she'd expected. Another lesson learned about the temporary nature of ill-gotten gains. The documentary crew finished filming yesterday, Sarah noted. They're calling it The Silent Empire, a story of financial abuse and corporate justice. Early feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The wisdom gained from this experience had transformed not just our companies, but the lives of countless employees. Every person who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed under David's leadership now had the opportunity to reach their full potential. Your speaking requests continue to pour in, Sarah added. Women's business groups, corporate governance, conferences, financial literacy programs. Your story is inspiring people to recognize and stand up to financial abuse. I smiled, thinking of all the times David had mocked my little online business. That business had grown into an empire, while his carefully constructed world of privilege and corruption had crumbled to dust. The final lesson wasn't about revenge, though that had been undeniably satisfying. It was about patience, strategy, and the power of quietly building something extraordinary while others underestimate you. It was about turning financial abuse into financial empowerment, not just for myself, but for others. As night fell over Manhattan, I watched the lights come on across the city. Somewhere out there, David was preparing for his sentencing, his future now as uncertain as he had once made mine feel. But here, in the empire I'd built while he wasn't watching, the future was brighter than ever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about making someone pay for their actions. It's about building something stronger, better, and more inclusive, from the ashes of their destruction. That was the true wisdom gained, and that would be my lasting legacy.